Module 12, the lymphatic system. Acquired immunity, Part 1, humoral immunity. The final and perhaps the most fascinating line of defense of the body is acquired immunity. Let's go back to our castle example. Say the kingdom is occasionally attacked. There is one unique group of attackers that it comes across. This group fights in a way that the castle inhabitants aren't used to. They use flying machines that carry bags filled with boiling oil. That would be a terrible attack, wouldn't it? Well, during this first attack, the people in the castle realized that they could launch long spears to pop the bags before they reached the castle. But they only had time to make them once they were under attack and realized it would work. Thankfully, they were able to fight off the flying machine attackers and the bad guys went away. Well, to make sure they were always prepared to fight them off if they ever came back, the people in the castle made a large supply of long spears that they kept in storage. They also trained a few craftsmen to make them so they could rapidly resupply if needed, and they were always prepared to fight off that flying machine band of invaders. That's a nice story, but it's also similar to the way that the human body works when it utilizes acquired immunity. The immune system has a memory. Once it becomes infected by a specific foreign invader, it can remember how to fight it off if it ever invades again. Now, there are two types of acquired immunity. Humoral immunity is the acquired immunity provided by antibodies in the blood plasma. Cell-mediated immunity is the acquired immunity provided by T lymphocytes. You see, the lymphatic system can produce antibodies that fight off specific antigens found on the plasma membranes of cells. We discussed a bit about antigens and antibodies when you learned about blood types. If a person has the antibody against the A antigens found on erythrocytes, then that person cannot receive a blood transfusion of type A blood because his antibodies will attack the cells. Well, antibodies are made by lymphocytes that had matured in the red bone marrow. They then traveled via the bloodstream to lymphatic tissues. We call these lymphocytes that make antibodies B lymphocytes or B cells. It is the B lymphocytes that provide humoral immunity. Now, before I talk about this type of immunity anymore, let's first discuss exactly what antibodies are. They are special proteins that are Y-shaped. There are 4 polypeptide chains in all, 2 heavy chains that are exactly the same, and 2 light chains that are the same. Now, the tips of these chains will vary depending on the type of antibody. That allows the specific antibodies to attack their specific antigens. We call these areas variable regions, and that's where the antibody binds to the antigen. Sometimes they're referred to as antigen binding sites. These sites are perfectly shaped to fit into an antigen like a lock and key. Because the rest of the antibody proteins do not vary from one to the other, the rest of the chain areas are called the constant region. The variable region of an antibody determines the specific antigen that that antibody fights against, and the constant region determines the way or the method it will fight off the antigen. And depending on the characteristics of the constant region, antibodies can be divided into groups or classes. There are 5 major classes, each fighting antigens a little bit differently from the other. The classes are IgG, IgM, IgA, IgE, and IgD. The most common antibody type are the IgG antibodies. They help encourage phagocytosis by binding to the antigen with their variable regions. They then attach to macrophages with their constant region. The macrophages do the rest by using phagocytosis to engulf the antigen. The largest antibodies are the IgM antibodies. They are made from 5 smaller Y-shaped units and connect antigens together by binding with their variable regions and then using their constant regions to activate complement proteins in the innate defensive system. IgG antibodies can do the same thing as IgM antibodies too. IgA antibodies are secreted antibodies. They look like 2 IgG antibodies connected at the stems. The saliva, tears, and mucous membranes contain IgA antibodies, as well as breast milk, which helps to provide immunity for a nursing infant. IgE antibodies work to help start the inflammatory response. They attach to an antigen by their variable region, and then attach to a basophil with their constant region, activating the basophil to release its inflammatory chemicals. Finally, IgD antibodies work to make antigens inactive by just binding to them. So to sum up, antibodies fight antigens by binding directly to them, binding them together in groups, activating complement, stimulating phagocytosis, and stimulating inflammation. B lymphocytes, or B cells, are the cells that produce antibodies. These specialized lymphocytes are made from stem cells in the red bone marrow and spread through the lymphatic tissues all over the body. These cells have antigen binding sites on their plasma membranes, so when they are first exposed to the antigen that they are specifically designed for, their antigen sites will bind to that antigen and the B cells begin rapid mitosis. That produces two types of B cells, plasma B cells and memory B cells. Plasma B cells release antibodies into the plasma so the antibodies can fight off their specific antigens. But the memory B cells are different. They are long-lived cells that don't release their antibodies. They instead will move throughout the body, waiting for the next attack by the antigen. It's kind of like our craftsmen in the castle example. They are ready to produce special spears at a moment's notice, having seen this type of attack before and knowing what to do. Memory B cells allow the body to respond much more quickly to any future infection by that same attacker with that same antigen. And that is how the immune system has memory. Memory B cells are also the reason that vaccinations work to give a person immunity to a specific pathogen. There are two types of vaccines. One has a weakened form of the pathogen. This way, the weak or dead pathogen can't take over your body, but its presence enables your lymphatic system to identify it, make antibodies to attack and destroy it, and then make memory B cells in case the body ever sees this specific infection again. So even though your body receives an injection of a pathogen, its weakened or dead state triggers your immune system without the great risk of that pathogen overtaking your body. The other vaccine type includes a synthetic chemical that causes the body to react as if a specific pathogen has infected the body. It makes the body think it's being attacked, causing the immune system to react, producing antibodies to fight it off and make memory B cells to be prepared if it ever sees that specific infection again. Vaccines have pretty much gotten rid of once common childhood diseases that resulted in so many deaths. A good example of this is the smallpox vaccine. Smallpox has virtually been eliminated due to the vaccine preventing children from contracting the disease. And it's the same situation with the measles. Once a common illness, it's virtually unheard of in the United States, most doctors having never even seen a case in person. Now, memory B cells are long-lived, but they don't survive the entire lifespan of a person. Thus, there are some vaccines that require a booster to improve the memory of the infection. So, a first exposure to a pathogen causes the body to produce a primary response. That response is to fight off the infection and make memory B cells so that they are ready in case of another infection. If the body experiences another infection, then the memory B cells will produce a secondary response. There's one more important thing to discuss regarding antibodies. Your body seems to know what cells are you and what cells are not. For example, if you have Rh negative blood, your body won't make the antibody against the Rh antigen unless you're exposed to Rh positive blood. If that happens, your body suddenly begins making antibodies to fight off that Rh antigen. Your lymphatic system knows your blood type. It knows which erythrocytes are yours and which are foreign. How in the world does it know this? Well, there are about 20 types of glycoproteins in the cell membranes of your body. A glycoprotein is a combination of protein and carbohydrate molecules. We call this group of glycoproteins the major histocompatibility complex, or MHC for short. These glycoproteins have a specific structure based on your personal DNA instructions. And the instructions involve over 50 separate alleles. So that means there are billions of possible combinations that these alleles can code for to make a unique MHC for you. Like a fingerprint, it's practically impossible that any two persons would have identical MHCs, or glycoprotein groups, unless they are identical twins. So any cell with your specific MHC won't be attacked by your lymphatic system because it identifies your pattern of proteins as you.